Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. So as Helen already introduced me, my name is Helin Herbauer. I'm a Turkish qualified lawyer, and I work with the UNODC Gender Team. Today, I will be with you during this roundtable talk, and I want to start by also thanking Helen and UN Women Austria and everyone who worked on this to make it happen. I want this to be an interactive session with a combination of different images showing different situations and videos where we will look at the first gendered nature of organized crime, and then we will follow with a Q&A session. We will also talk about institutional mechanisms that we are having at the UNODC for gender mainstreaming and also the role of UNODC Gender Team. I will continue. Okay. So let's start first by UNODC and its mandate. So UNODC, which is United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, it has been established in 1997, and its mission is to make the world safer from drugs, crime, and terrorism. So in order to reach this goal, UNODC is working for and also with member states. UNOV, on the other hand, is the United Nations Office at Vienna. It was established in 1980 as the third United Nations headquarters after New York and Geneva and before Nairobi. So the mandated areas of UNODC, when we talk about those, when we say drugs, crime, and terrorism, they're actually pretty straightforward, but I want us to take a moment and reflect on what do we actually think about when we are talking about drugs, crime, and terrorism. I will show you some pictures here. Those are some pictures which you come across when you search for these keywords on the internet. When you type drugs, human trafficking, corruption, drug trafficking, terrorism, violent groups. So these are the pictures that we are usually coming across to. I would like to first ask if anyone wants to take the floor and comment on what do they think about when they talk about these terms. Is there anyone who wants to share their thoughts? No? If not, then I will continue. So when you look into different areas that UNODC is working on, such as criminal justice here, or human trafficking, drug trafficking, terrorism, corruption, violent groups, you will always see the common understanding, which is always the first thing that you will see in all the pictures and all the documentations and all the thought sharing process, which is the male involvement. Today, I am aiming to change on that. But the reality is that women are actually involved in these mandated areas as much as men, if not more in some cases. So here are some figures that I am showing in the screen, but I would like to start with the criminal justice. So let's look at the criminal justice. We know that historically, women have been more likely to commit minor offenses and have made up only a very small proportion of the offender population. And because of the relatively small number of the female offenders, differences in the experiences of women in the criminal justice system are not reflected into the policies. And when women are caught committing serious crimes or corruption, they're often judged more harshly than their male counterparts. Moreover, there are no often special considerations or adjustments for women going through the criminal justice systems and their needs, such as health needs, psychological needs, but also needs on how to reintegrate into society in the post-imprisonment time. These needs are usually not met. In today's world, studies actually indicate a faster increase in the rate of women's imprisonment in some countries in comparison to men. And this is not just being offenders or being imprisoned, but also as victims. Women are more likely than men to be victims of certain types of crimes, for example, intimate partner violence or sexual violence. So the point here that I would like to make is that criminal justice systems have been historically designed by men, for men, and often fail to consider the different needs of all individuals in the society. And understanding the relationship between gender and UNODC's mandates, which is what we are doing in UNODC Gender Team, is really, really important in order to ensure that all these policies, programs, and actions to address these crimes are effective for the population as a whole. Let's briefly look into the UNODC's mandates one by one so that we can better understand the gendered nature of organized crime. So building up to what we have already discussed about women in criminal justice system, I would like to look at women in drug use. So what is true in the criminal justice system is also true for supporting women going through drug treatment. Women have a harder time accessing help, and the support is often targeting men, meaning that women are underrepresented in drug-related treatments. So there's an interesting data that shows that 1 in 3 people who use drugs is actually a woman, but only 1 in 5 of drug users in treatment is a woman. So the treatments that often don't cater to women's needs. It can be seen from the data here that the majority of people who use drugs are men, but when we look at the breakdown, we see that women use some drug types nearly as much as men. For example, in the right side of the slide, you can see that with regards to the use of cannabis, the gender gap is actually narrowing. What UNODC does is that UNODC works to address the world drug problem with a balanced approach, and we are using health principles, scientific evidence, human rights, and gender considerations. So in this regard, we are supporting prevention of drug use, treatment, healthcare, social protection services, access to controlled drugs. And moreover, as part of its mandate in criminal justice, UNODC also works with prison inmates, both male and female. There are several causes and consequences of drug use disorders among women. This includes social inequalities, gender-based violence, childhood adversity and abuse, post-traumatic stress disorders, and many more. Males far outnumber females among drug treatment clients. And as I emphasized before, even though 1 out of 3 drug users is a woman, only 1 out of 5 drug users is treatment is a woman. So, and it's not just that women are underrepresented, but also the treatment services do not respond to the needs of women with drug use disorders and are more designed to respond to the needs of the majority, which are men with drug use disorders. Female prisoners, especially those with drug use disorders, face particular hardships. Many criminal justice systems are not yet equipped for special needs of women, including those with drug use disorders. As part of this world drug problem, let's also look at women in drug supply chain. I would also like to emphasize that because whenever we are talking about drugs, crime, and terrorism, we are often seeing women as victims, but they can also be perpetrators and they can be the ones who starts these crimes. So when we look into the intersection of gender and crime, women's involvement is often seen as part of victimization, where they are in a vulnerable position or a marginalized position, but in reality, women are also really taking roles as perpetrators of these crimes. And the data here shows that women are just as involved as men in smuggling cocaine inside their bodies. The decision for being involved in drug-related activities is often shared by limited choices, such as working conditions where women are working longer hours to make the ends meet, often in lower-paying jobs with less or no pay and less opportunities. But the reality is that women's involvement in the drug supply chain in different roles has actually increased. When we look into women in the criminal justice system, we often see that imprisonment has a heavy toll on women. Prison rarely meets the specific needs of women, and women often face with more stigma, less family support, and lower reinsertion after release. Looking at UNODC's mandate on organized crime, we see that women are involved in organized crime and trafficking as victims and also traffickers. From the data here, it shows that women and children have greater risk of encountering violence at the hands of traffickers. When it comes to human trafficking, women and girls are especially at risk. The latest UNODC report actually found that for every 10 victims detected globally, 5 were women and 2 were girls. And in many displacement situations, especially in conflict situations, women and girls assume the primary role of the breadwinner as men are engaged as soldiers. And if displaced women and girls do not get the necessary support or have the necessary skills or support to sustain themselves or earn an income, there is a significant risk that their livelihoods will be unsustainable in their places of refuge. One of the examples of existing gender inequalities is women's limited access to resources. So the social and cultural norms are at the bottom of this, as they limit women and girls to the domestic realm, which makes it harder for them to integrate socially, culturally, and as well as on an economic level. Let's look at another UNODC mandate, which is corruption. So not only do corruption and gender inequality present challenges, they are also interlinked. Corruption reduces women's opportunities. Women and other groups in situations of disadvantage tend to be disproportionately affected by corruption. The evidence finds that this is in part because in most societies, women as a group have less socioeconomic power than men, and in part because there are certain public services that women rely on and where corruption is more likely to be prevalent. In both these cases, intersectional identities of gender with ethnicity, class, age, they all play a crucial role. Corruption impacts women and men differently due to social and cultural norms that influence how people interact and how they access public services such as education and healthcare. So due to women's reproductive healthcare needs, women are disproportionately vulnerable to corruption in this. Studies also show that diversity in the position of power actually reduces the risk of corruption. For example, studies have shown that in private sector, a more diverse and gender equal top management correlates with increased transparency, increased financial performance, enhanced levels of innovation, and better sustainability approaches. Lastly, I will talk about terrorism. So terrorism is a highly gendered crime. A person's gender will often play a significant role in how their lives are affected by terrorism. Women can actively support terrorist groups and also be involved in terrorism-related offenses, although they will often serve in different roles than men. Moreover, the terrorist groups specifically target women through acts of sexual and gender-based violence, such as rape, sexual slavery, and forced marriage. So despite the many ways in which women are specifically affected by terrorism, responses to terrorism in many countries are often still led by men, who may not be the best place to consider the needs and views of women. So in order to include a gender perspective into UNODC's mandated areas and what we have talked so far, we as the UNODC Gender Team are working to promote and mainstream gender equality through all UNODC publications, programs, policies, and initiatives. We are supporting the development of capacity building tools to integrate gender considerations effectively. In addition to gender mainstreaming on UNODC's programmatic activities, we are also working on in relation to organizational policies that we have in UNODC and practices to support gender parity and creating an enabling work environment. Now I will show a little video to see what gender mainstreaming means. So let me emphasize first that gender mainstreaming is really not simply adding women to an existing activity. It is actually a strategy for assessing the gendered implications of any planned action, including policies, programming, or legislation, and for ensuring that gender concerns and experiences are an integral consideration in the design, formulation, implementation, analysis, and monitoring of such actions. So gender mainstreaming is actually about seeing the differences in what women and men are experiencing and needing. So applying a gender lens makes UNODC better at what we do and provides information and influences on how we tackle a problem. I want to give you a very, very practical example. I want you to imagine that you're a border guard, and thanks to having colleague female border guards who can search women and girls crossing the border, you have been able to detect a girl smuggling drugs across country border. Do you think you can treat her in the same way as you would a 50-year-old man? So if anyone wants to comment on this, I'm happy to listen. Here, what becomes clear is that this girl and this man have different backgrounds. They have different rights in their countries. They have different motivations for doing what they are doing. And we need to have laws, policies, legislations, programs, and projects that are able to understand these differences and address them. Otherwise, they are not as effective, and they're only addressing some part of the population, but not all. Now I want to talk about how we do it. So how we do gender mainstreaming at UNODC. So as we said, it is a process. It's not a one-time thing, and it should be included in all steps of program management. UNODC's institutional approach to gender equality and women's empowerment includes senior management leading the efforts, gender strategy action plan and the regional action plans, gender-sensitive approval structures where UNODC's programmatic work needs to get approval through checklists that are taking gender considerations into account, and unless they pass or be cleared by these checklists, they cannot be implemented. Capacity building on how to practically gender mainstreaming in the programs of UNODC staff, awareness raising and outreach activities, gender team and gender focal points, because without a dedicated entity that works on gender and guides and monitors the activities for the whole organization and coordinates with the focal points in the regions, it wouldn't be possible to mainstream gender, especially in an effective manner. And of course, in the organization, we have accountability mechanisms. So let's talk about the overall framework that guides all the work on gender issues that we do in UNODC, which is the UNODC gender strategy. So there is a dual purpose in the strategy, which looks at both the support that we give member states, but also makes sure that we as an organization, we walk the talk. So it ensures that the intersectional approach to gender equality is applied to all aspects of the office's internal institutional systems, processes, as well as programmatic work and activities as a core component of ensuring that no one is left behind. This strategy has two goals. So goal A is contribute to the delivery of global results on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls through the activities of the United Nations Office at Vienna and UNODC. Goal B is to strengthen the institutional capacity and effectiveness of the United Nations Office at Vienna and UNODC to enhance the delivery of results on intersectional gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. So the strategy objectives are effective gender mainstreaming, promoting the participation of women in all UNODC's mandated areas on transnational organized crime, terrorism, corruption, criminal justice, and world drug problem. Strengthen knowledge and capacities for gender mainstreaming, ensure implementation of global commitments on gender equality, such as Beijing Platform, BPS agenda, etc., and the gender parity within UNODC and creating an enabling work environment. So here you can see the gender mainstreaming efforts of the UNODC Gender Team. In order to reach these goals, we have a dedicated gender team and gender strategy focal points working on these issues on a day-to-day basis. So we are having regular gender mainstreaming webinars, tailor-made trainings, tools tailored to UNODC mandate, and we participate in interagency working groups. So as part of the interagency collaboration, we have an interagency network on women and gender equality and subgroups. We have International Gender Champions Initiative. We have Women, Peace and Security Working Group. For the International Gender Champions Initiatives, for the last 6 months, UNODC Gender Team was leading the coordination for the IGC Vienna Hub, which is now continued by the gender unit at UNIDO. We have the IC Gender Focal Point Network. UNODC Gender Team is also chairing this group currently for a period of 6 months. And lastly, we have the Memorandum of Understanding with UN Women, which has been recently signed in order to strengthen the cooperation and activities between UNODC and UN Women. And as part of this Memorandum of Understanding, UNODC and UN Women will cooperate on the areas of data collection, research, analysis, programs and operations, policy development, and advocacy, visibility, and fundraising. So for awareness raising and outreach activities, as I just mentioned, you can check the UNODC Gender website, which you can see from the screen. You will see several gender initiatives on our website. The last one is the 2023 edition of Vienna Discussion Forum, which will take place in November and address the issues of gender and corruption. So this is an annual event organized by UNODC, UNIDO, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. And lastly, a selection of publications and research on gender and UNODC mandates, which can also be found in UNODC Gender website, where you can see the work of UNODC Gender Team in more detail, tailored by each mandated areas. Thank you very much for having me today, and I will now answer if we have any questions.